Hello, everyone. Welcome to our panel. I'm so excited. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed with awe today with my panel members. We're going to have an awesome discussion today about how the world is changing and how post-secondary education seems to be moving toward at least a future where we are more learner-centered and more learner-obsessed in terms of the value that we're providing with our educational programming. So I'd like to let my panel introduce themselves. Let's start with you, Lisa. We have Lisa Gevelber here, who is the founder of Grow with Google. And Lisa, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and also just what your passion for a learner-first, learner-centered educational future looks like?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Lisa Gevelber, and I founded a program called Grow with Google, which is Google's commitment to economic opportunity. We launched in 2017, and by 2018, our very first thing we did was launch a career certificate, a professional certificate on Coursera. And my personal passion for this is really all about, at its heart, my personal journey. My father was the first person in his family. He and his brother were the first people in their family to go to college, and my brothers and I put ourselves through college. And we were lucky. And I really feel like the most important thing I can be doing with my career is helping others achieve economic opportunity. So for me, it's quite personal. And for Google, it really ties to our mission. And our belief that the opportunities that are created by technology should truly be available to everyone. And our work with Coursera and the professional certificate program is a really important part of our efforts.
Ryan, so we have Ryan Craig, and he is Managing Director at Achieve Partners. Ryan, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Marnie. Great to be here. I run a investment firm called Achieve Partners. That's my day job. We invest at the intersection of education and employment, the future of earning and learning, as we call it. But what I do on the side is I write about the future of higher education, and I have a newsletter called The Gap Letter, and I've written 2 books, College Disrupted and A New You, Faster and Cheaper Alternatives to College. And then I have a new book coming out this fall called Apprentice Nation. So we'll talk more about that. But I'm committed to a learner-first market. My first job ever was at a community college. My mother was a faculty member. My first job out of law school was working at Columbia University for a hard-charging executive vice provost by the name of Michael Crow. And since then, I've just been committed to improving student outcomes out of higher education.
Yes, and you've had a big influence on a lot of us, so thanks for your work. Hannah, so we have Hannah Johnson. Hannah is Senior Vice President and Head of Tech Talent Programs at CompTIA.
Thanks, Marnie, and thanks to everybody at the Coursera team for hosting such a wonderful conference. It's been a blast so far. My name is Hannah. I am the SVP of Tech Talent Programs at CompTIA. It's actually a newly created role, which is pretty exciting. My call to action within CompTIA is to really figure out how we can thoughtfully and intentionally incorporate soft skills, durable skills, human skills, a lot of the topics that I think we'll touch on today that are clearly in demand, right, in a variety of industries and specifically in the tech industry. So very excited to be on this panel today with these thought leaders and figure out how we can work together to help solve some of these problems. Quite passionate about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And last but not least, we have Adam Fine from the University of North Texas, who is Vice President of Digital Strategy and Innovation there, and founder of quite a few innovative programs, I would say. Adam, can you introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you, Marnie, and it's a pleasure to be with all of you today. I love my job. I'm very thankful for the opportunities I have. I came to the University of North Texas about 4 years ago now. We are a minority majority, 40% first generation research tier 1 university in an 8 million person metroplex. So the opportunities for impact are high. And So we think about learners all the time. I have two of my favorite groups that I get to work with on campus is my Undergraduate Innovation Advisory Board and Graduate Innovation Advisory Board. So if we're not listening to our students, then we can't do best for them. And so anyway, happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks for joining us. And you have just been such an innovative partner in thinking through how sort of learner first, alternative, I hate that word, pathways to value really intersect and synergize with degree pathways as well. So let's start by priming the pump a little bit. I'll see if this works. Yes, it does. Okay, so recently Coursera, and you may have heard about this a little bit earlier, did some research globally on learner and employer sentiments around the value of short-form credentials, so industry-recognized, industry-endorsed credentials. The research spanned the globe. We're looking across countries and regions of the world, very different economies, very different workforce issues to be solved, problems to be solved. And it was a survey-based research that where we talked to over 3,000 learners from those regions and over 1,000 employers. The learners were learners in professional certificate programs, so industry-recognized or industry-endorsed certificate programs, and the employers were employers in those fields, IT and IT-related fields primarily, who were looking to employ sort of early career starters as part of their work. And so what we found, I thought, was very interesting. Having worked in the field of micro-credentials and professional certificates and competency-based education over the years, I have always been told, and I know, Ryan, you've probably heard this a lot too, that I was crazy, that learners did not value these certificates and certifications because they didn't know what they meant, and that employers did not value certificates and certifications because they didn't know what they meant. And I was always like, oh well, let's do it anyway because they're valuable, they're credible, and they seem like a great asset for learners to have as they go out into the workplace. What I found interesting about this research is that it seems to bear out that sentiment is moving in that direction. That 90% of the students surveyed really felt that not only would they be sort of more enticed or engaged in a program of study that had skills-based professional certificates and certifications, and more likely to choose programs that included them, but they also truly believe their sentiment was that if they did that there was a value when they get out into the employment marketplace. And so that's really interesting shift. I wish we had done this research prior to COVID and post-COVID to see if perhaps there was a sort of a change in sentiment due to COVID. But it was very interesting to see. The second interesting insight from this research is that 88% of employers said that they were looking for learners or for potential employees who had these skills-based certificates and certifications, and that they were valuing those certificates and certifications as part of their hiring process. Now, they did not say that was the only thing they were looking for. They may be looking for degrees or work experience as well, but the fact that these certificates and certifications were there was a great signal to employers that this was a person they'd like to hire, that they'd feel confident about hiring. And I think what's interesting about that is, like, one of the prevailing narratives about short-form credentials has been, you may get students to take them, but employers don't know what they are, and they aren't going to use them in their hiring process. So I'll leave it at that. This research is coming out. I believe it'll be out on our blog soon if it isn't already, so you can check it out and go deeper. But I just thought I'd present this at the start of our conversation to get us thinking.
Can I just make a point?
Sure,
on that?
sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the hiring process, it's helpful to think about hiring as a funnel,
Yeah.
where you have the top of the funnel, where you have, in many cases, thousands of applicants, for every open position. And then you have sort of mid-funnel, where you actually have a human who's looking at resumes and interviewing candidates. Then you have bottom funnel, where you're sort of selecting from a handful of candidates. And I would completely agree with the research. My research and work demonstrates that mid-funnel and bottom funnel, these industry recognized credentials and certifications absolutely help candidates step out. Where we're still having trouble, though, is top of funnel. Where you have applicant tracking systems filtering thousands of resumes for every position. And I've been pointing out, and Sean Gallagher at Northeastern just did a paper on this. Applicant tracking systems are not yet situated to interpret all of these micro-credentials.
Micro-credentials, absolutely. And there is no record or consistent set of sort of data around these that's consumable by those systems, and that is surely an issue as well. I don't know, Hannah, if you wanted to weigh in on that at all, because I know CompTIA does amazing research on employer demand and geolocated employer demand. Like, what are you seeing?
I think what I would love to add to what Ryan mentioned from a top of funnel perspective is one of the things that we've identified and are continuing to try and make progress towards is also there's the ATS systems, but there's also the job postings themselves, and how often those lead to overspecking, right? And the fact that many people out there are actually quite qualified for jobs and positions, but through a variety of reasons, the job posting itself may be weeding out people, and it's a big problem. So one of the things that we did was create a tool that any employer can use. It's free. It's available to anybody. It's optimize.comptia.org, and you can go in, and obviously these are specifically roles related to the IT industry and tech-related jobs, but say you need a network admin, it'll plug in, it'll give you a job spec that we believe is going to give you the broadest amount of candidates, but also the most well-qualified for the position.
I love that tool.
Yeah.
I saw it. I was on the National Institute for Cybersecurity Education board, and your team came in to demo that tool. And cybersecurity is particularly struggling with this top of funnel problem because of a lot of sort of incumbent rules about who you can hire and not hire. I felt that was a really interesting tool. So please check that tool out, as well as all the great research.
I just want to add, this top of funnel problem is not an excuse to ignore micro-credentials.
Exactly.
Right? This is a technology problem that's being solved. It's a job description problem that's being solved. But this is the future, and universities need to pay attention.
So let's dive into that future a little bit. I'd love to get your perspectives, and you each have really interesting kind of lenses on this from your work. So I guess we'll start with a broad-based question for all of you, for each of you, which is, we see this research, we're hearing about it in the trade presses, we're hearing about skills-based hiring, we're hearing about earn-to-learn pathways, we're reading about how traditional populations that institutions were expecting in like community college are way down. We're hearing a lot of insight about why that is, that they're going for shorter form certification and technical programs. I mean, it's all around us. And it's 10x'd in terms of that narrative has just become louder and louder since COVID. So all very interesting, but are we ready? Are we ready to reimagine post-secondary education around this reality where employers need an agile workforce now to serve like massive workforce shortages, acute workforce shortages, and where learners are increasingly looking for a more explicit value proposition in the money that they spend on a degree pathway? Are we ready? So Adam, I'll start with you.
Sure. I think that we're ready. And we were talking about this backstage a little bit, that I feel like finally, after decades of talking about this, it's moving from an either or to a both and. And for all the audiences you just mentioned, Marnie, I think the most compelling is we're hearing it from our own students. They also want that. And I think especially they're interested in it if it's part of their degree. So one of the things we do at University of North Texas is allow for some of these industry, and I think that's important, industry endorsed or industry produced certificates to be a part of their degree. So you can take the Google IT certificate as part of the bachelor's completion program that we have now. And so we call it a +1. So that student is now graduating with a UNT bachelor's degree, which holds a lot of value still. All studies show the degree hasn't lost value, but now you're +1ing it with Google, with IBM, with Meta. And early days yet, but the returns have been very positive.
That's wonderful. Hannah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think wholeheartedly, yes. I think that speaking on, from the CompTIA lens and CompTIA's perspective, I believe that we want to really help be sort of stewards and champions of this change and work with all of those, both in higher education and our industry partners and employers, to figure out how we can help bridge the gaps to figure out solutions that will actually work to progress these problems that we're seeing.
And for those who may not know, which is, I can't believe this would be the case, but if there's anybody in the audience who doesn't know what CompTIA does, could you just explain pretty quickly so we can get your comments?
Yes, I will. I apologize. I should have done that in my intro. So CompTIA is the Computing Technology Industry Association, and our role as a nonprofit trade organization is to represent the IT and technology industry, which means that we do a variety of things to move different initiatives forward that we hear from not just learners and those wanting to get into tech jobs, but also, again, those employing them and those that also offer technical services. We pretty much do whatever we can from a research perspective. And then our bread and butter has really been our IT certification programs and the credentials around them and the gold standard that I believe we've set in terms of how truly capable anybody who goes through one of our programs is going to be in a given IT role once they complete that exam or that certification, and making sure that, again, those are recognized by employers in all industries, right? Not just tech, but those are just some snippets.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Marnie has some great experience as well, so could certainly speak to other areas.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure people understand. And the breadth of your involvement working with all types of education providers and employers, it gives you a really broad-based view. Ryan?
So, I mean, initially my response was, so I'm supposed to be the provocateur.
Yeah, that's right.
No. And I like to say no one has ever gone broke betting against the pace of change in higher education. But I do think that here, given all the progress we've seen over the past couple of years, it's a qualified yes. And the qualification is if universities can get out of the not invented here mentality that most have, and as evidenced by transfer credit. Right?
Yeah.
When a student comes from a community college and wants to transfer a credit, that transfer decision is made at the department or faculty level, and often it's, well, that Psych 110 course is not the equivalent of the one I teach.
Yeah. Not
invented here. The problem with not invented here and micro-credentials and a learner-first approach is that what's relevant are industry-recognized credentials, which are by definition not invented here. So what I see is lots of universities saying, oh, we're doing micro-credentials, we're doing stackable credentials. And they have faculty members developing a data science certificate program. Well, that's nice, but no employer is going to understand what that data science certificate program is. You need to actually look at what the industry-recognized credential is, and then incorporate that into your degree program.
Yeah.
So not invented here will not work in this world.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And just another point from the research, which I hope you will take a look at when it gets published, is that when we surveyed the learners, the number one factor for whether or not they would choose to engage in a micro-credential program was that it was produced by or endorsed by an employer.
Yeah.
They were not looking for micro-credentials produced by necessarily their faculty in their program, but they wanted that imprimatur of Google or IBM or Meta or Disney, and yeah. So Lisa, you have been deep in this work. What are your thoughts on
We are deep in it. And I would say society is definitely ready for this. There is no question that having a college degree is life-changing. It just can't be the only way to change your life. And so I think there's a bunch of societal factors that make it ripe for change, including the fact that about 80% of the jobs that pay more than $35,000 a year say they require a degree, but only about a third of Americans have one.
Yeah.
We can't have that big a mismatch forever. And I think what we're hearing from employers, and we have a consortium of over 150 employers, and we actually have thousands of employers who are hiring the Google Career Certificate graduates. What we hear from them was they were dying for alternatives. And that's super consistent with what you see in the industry data. So the PwC annual global CEO survey says that 4 out of 5 CEOs say that one of the top inhibitors for them growing their business is they haven't been able to find people with the skills they need to grow the business. So even just in the career fields that we teach in the Google Career Certificates on Coursera, there's 2 million open jobs just in the US. Employers are dying for ways to find people with the skilled talent that they need. And as we heard and talked about today, students are incredibly interested. The Coursera survey shows that, and we see it every day. We have graduated hundreds of thousands of people already with the Google Career Certificates, and about 75% of those graduates were able to accomplish a real career impact within 6 months of graduating. And so I think, and we have graduates from all backgrounds. People are realizing that even if you have a college degree, the skills you need in the workforce change all the time. We saw some technology discussion this morning. And so you can't teach everyone everything they're going to need to know for their entire career, even in the 4-year period that they might be at an outstanding university. And so having these industry recognized credentials is going to be important for keeping all of us up to date with our skills for the jobs of today.
Yeah, for sure. And who better to do it than those on the front lines of the change, and with that incredible expertise. So based on what you just said, I mean, skills, right? There are thousands and thousands of skills, right? So how do we decide which are the most valuable skills to focus on in doing this work? What's the rubric for figuring that out?
Well, in my last book, I came up with a sort of a framework for thinking about this, which is, if you actually look at the job descriptions that employ, particularly for entry-level jobs, which I think is what most universities should be focused on, it's a combination of digital and platform skills, technical skills, combined with business, industry, or functional knowledge / experience.
Yeah.
So there's a skills gap, and then there's an experience gap as well that we're seeing. And you can go down sort of the list of Burning Glass has this data available, or Lightcast, I forget. Lightcast. And you can look at the skills listed in job descriptions, and you can see what these skills are. The unfortunate part is that most colleges and universities don't teach or train on these skills today. I was speaking to an audience of a couple hundred college and university presidents right before COVID, and I said, "Are you aware that there are 1 million, sort of unfilled Salesforce jobs out there in the country? How many of your, raise your hand if your school provides any training at all on the Salesforce platform?" And not one hand went up in the room. And that's a perfect example of a platform skill Salesforce is increasingly the operating system of American business, and yet colleges and universities don't view that as their province. I coined the term last mile training to reflect this, what's needed here. And it's not to say that, colleges aren't doing a great job today. I think they're doing as great a job as they've ever done, equipping students with the cognitive skills, critical thinking, problem solving, communication, executive function skills. But the problem is that the employers, and largely driven by digital transformation, employers and employment have sort of moved away at almost now light speed from that. And so there's a gap out there, and that gap can be filled by micro-credentials and industry-recognized credentials.
Yeah. Hannah, did you?
Yeah, I think that, we've been using the term durable skills, right, in partnership with America Succeeds to try and fill these gaps. But I think to your point, Ryan, that it's really the practical application of those skills and what does it look like for a certain job or a certain career path. And I think starting at the entry level makes a ton of sense. A new CompTIA study is going to come out on Tuesday about workforce trends, and one of the summary items was that the T-shaped skills, right, are continuing to be more in demand as well, which means, you want to start with depth and then you want to go breadth-wise, right, so that you can apply those skills then on to different types of career paths as you go on. But I think starting with that last mile journey to get that first job, and then figuring out how do we go deep and then how do you go wide.
Yeah.
And I think one of the areas that we're passionate about is figuring out ways to provide the skills you were referencing from the 4-year degree to students and to potential candidates who aren't going to go that path as well.
Yeah.
So through, which I'm sure we'll talk about, apprenticeships, experiential learning opportunities, et cetera.
Indeed. Yeah. Lisa, what's your, if you can talk about this, what's your rubric for what you decide to focus in on? Are they the biggest pain points for Google, or are they, what research do you base that on when you make that decision?
Yeah, from the very beginning when we started creating professional certificates, we're kind of a database place. And so we were specifically scoping around really in-demand careers that were projected to keep growing, so they weren't going to go away anytime soon, that pay really well, that we really believe we could teach in an online on-demand way, because that is the way working Americans need to learn. About a quarter of Americans, for example, don't even know their work schedule for the following week, so they can't commit to a classroom schedule very easily. And where Google had unique expertise. And, a really good example of this is data analytics. So McKinsey recently produced a study that says the biggest skills gap there is around demand is for data analytics skills, and they're growing at about the demand for them is growing at about 15 times the demand for average skills. So we can see this huge pull from employers looking for people with data analytics skills. But what's kind of fun at Google too is we can see search queries. And what we see is that learners are actually looking for data analytics skills. So last year in 2022, the data shows that how to become queries were at all-time highs, and how to become a data analyst was the absolute highest, most popular query of any how to become query in the world last year. And queries for data analytics job also just peaked worldwide in March of this year. So we can see it from both sides. People are looking to get these skills. There's obviously more and more data in the world, and people need to know how to understand it, how to analyze it, how to make decisions based on it, how to present it. So giant understanding among users that they need these skills, and a real demand from employers. And so for us, we're really connecting, helping people get those skills to meet the need of employers. And the way we do that, the process to your question is, we use only experts at Google. We don't outsource any of our curriculum to third parties. So we take our experts at Google that have decades of years of experience in the field, and we have them work from the job backward. What does someone need to know? And they design the initial curriculum that way. And then the next thing we do is go to top employers who hire lots of data analysts, for example, and we have them review and input to the curriculum so that we know we're teaching what employers are actually hiring for. And people like Deloitte helped us make our data analytics certificate better. They actually gave us some of the assessments that they use to test for mastery of things like SQL and R. And they even allowed us to build some of their assessments right into the Google Career Certificate for Data Analytics. And so now the Google Data Analytics Certificate is also a preferred hiring credential at Deloitte. So really making sure that employers are involved so that we're actually teaching people what employers want to hire for. So these students who get this learning will really be employable and useful to these companies. And so that's our process. We use it for everything. And the data analytics certificate was actually so popular on Coursera. It's the #1 professional certificate on Coursera that we now just last week launched 2 more data analytics certificates. We launched an advanced data analytics certificate, and we launched a business intelligence certificate that build on our data analytics certificate. And we invited our university partners to collaborate with us. And so the University of Michigan built a companion certificate. So you can take the Google Data Analytics Certificate, and then you could take the University of Michigan Companion Certificate, which is a short certificate that will give you an industry specialization. So theirs is about data analytics for the public sector. So now you can get a credential from the University of Michigan, so world-class faculty. I'm a University of Michigan grad, full disclosure. And it's not why they built it. And from experts at Google, all while furthering your skill set and your career. And then the University of Illinois also built on top of the Google Data Analytics Certificate. They built a companion certificate to become a financial analyst. So you can see now we have 5 certificates just in this little pod around this incredible need for data analytics skills.
And you're approaching that mastery-based sort of T-shape, which is, you're building mastery across mastery levels, and now you're broadening that across different applications. That's super exciting. Well, as I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh, this just sounds so powerful, and it sounds so thoughtful, and it sounds so amazing, so adoptable, right? It's so adoptable. Do you think, this is an unplanned question, here comes Adam giving it to you. So do you think part of the problem is the word skills?
I'm going to answer that, but let me come back to this because I just want to make a point that what we just talked about for the last 5 to 8 minutes has really caused panic and somewhat across higher education. We haven't been doing this well, Google's doing it well, but I think it's a great thing, and I don't think there should be panic at all. Lisa, what you said in the last minute there with University of Michigan and Illinois is really encouraging because it is the best of both worlds there. And so anyway, back to the skills thing. I do think some of the issue is with skills. We spend a lot of time thinking about this at University of North Texas. We're fortunate to be in the state of Texas where our State Board of Higher Education is actually talking about what they call credentials of value. So what you earn from that credential needs to be more than what you paid for that credential. And it's not just micro-credentials, but degrees and everything else. And so I think that's a really important way to look at this that keeps the learner in mind first. And we're building everything around that, not focused as much on, I'd call micro-credentials, like I'm a problem solver, I'm a leadership skill, or kind of the Boy Girl Scout badge thing. I think you've got to go beyond that. Get an industry-endorsed credential, something with skills that employers would say, and we hear this with some of our industry partners around Dallas-Fort Worth, hey, we were going to teach you that in the first 3 to 6 months of this job. You already have it. You came in with it because you got the bachelor's degree and you got the Google. You already had the skills. We can get right to kind of the deeper learning next.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I like the fact that when you think about some of these programs, they are deeply interdisciplinary. So when you call them skills-based learning, I think a lot of people skim over. They're like, oh, skills, those are atomic units, and that's technical education. But many of these industry-recognized, industry-endorsed certifications are deeply interdisciplinary. And so I like that way of thinking about it. I love the word value also, because that's really what it's about.
I want to give a shout out to the state of Texas. So my hat goes off to the state of Texas and Dr. Harrison Keller, who runs the higher education board in Texas. I think he is one of the most innovative learners on the planet in terms of preparing the population for the jobs of today and tomorrow. And his approach is so rational, this idea that they're going to offer a whole portfolio of credentials. They want 60% of Texans to earn a credential of value by 2030. And they have this entire rubric for measuring which credentials are valuable. And he personally is leading the way and taking the entire state forward in a way that I hope so many states will follow. So for sure, hats off to Dr. Keller and to the state of Texas and to the work you're doing, Adam.
You're going to add that interdisciplinary is great, but they shouldn't have to be, right?
No.
I think your point about skills being a dirty word is right. I think that in many four-year institutions, skills are synonymous with vocational, blue collar, and that may have been true 25 years ago, but digital transformation has changed all that. Look at the jobs, the good jobs that your graduates want to get and increasingly are not getting. And they're not getting them because they don't have the specific digital, technical, or business skills that they need. So interdisciplinary, we can aspire to that, and it's great. And by the way, what a great way, if you still have not invented here energy, what a great way to deploy it. Build on top of an industry-recognized credential. Don't try to invent your own. Build on top of it.
But build the interdisciplinarity out on top of the technical skills. I love that. So, we've all been talking today about generative AI. That's all we've been reading about, seeing, thinking. It's become so central to how we're thinking about the future of education. In this case, how does generative AI change the skills equation?
I'm happy to start. I just wrote a piece on it. It's going to come out next week. But now no one has to read it because they can hear it from me today. I think what's going to happen is you think about the skills gap and the experience gap. I think if you imagine a world where there is a Chat GPT large language model for every industry, right? I just saw Bloomberg has Bloomberg GPT now. It's based on 50 billion parameters for finance, right? That is going to help narrow the skills gap in that industry, right? You're going to not necessarily have to have the same level of technical skills because all of these platforms are going to have natural language interfaces. You'll be able to say, help me do this, and the platform will do that. So the skills gap will narrow, but the experience gap is going to become a chasm. Is my concern, which is that nobody without a year or two of experience in finance is going to be an able user of Bloomberg GPT. Right? And so the question is, how are you going to get that? And so I think a lot of jobs are going to go the way of cybersecurity jobs. So you look at entry-level cybersecurity jobs, and in many cases it's an oxymoron because these jobs that are supposed to be entry-level, if you look at the skills and certifications that they're asking for, it's like 3 years of experience in the field. So how do you get into cybersecurity? It's a huge problem. And I think that AI and imagine all these different GPTs and all these different industries are going to turn all entry-level jobs and all these other industries into cybersecurity-like jobs where you're just not going to be able to access it unless you have experience. And so that's why I'm so focused on earn and learn pathways and apprenticeship, because I think that for a decade down the line, for most young Americans, they're going to need some kind of earn and learn pathway that provides experience, relevant experience in that industry before they can have a hope of getting a good first job.
Absolutely. I want to come back to that in just a second. Anybody else have thoughts on, how are you, Google, come to you, how are you thinking about the change afoot and ahead?
Yeah, it's so fun to see all of today's excitement about AI. And obviously at Google, we've been working on AI for a really, really long time. As a matter of fact, last year my team launched a product called Interview Warm-Up Tool, and it's built on AI. We launched it, I think, last May, May 2022. And basically what it was is an interview practice tool, so that the people who go through our Google Career Certificates, or anyone else, it's an open tool, anyone can use it to practice with. And it helps you really improve your skills at interviewing, which we talked about applicant tracking systems at the top of the funnel, but as you go down the funnel, these interviewing is a skill itself, and it gets better with practice. And we thought, well, maybe people don't have anyone to practice with. How can we make it easier for them to get real-time, real feedback? And so we built the Google Interview Warm-Up Tool as just one example for how AI can help with some of these processes.
Yeah. How's CompTIA thinking about the impacts on the skills ecosystem ahead?
I think that I recently talked to Tim Herbert, our Chief Research Officer, about this very briefly, but I think that similar to what Ryan said, that we're feeling it out, right? We're feeling out what this is going to mean for our industry and what it's going to mean for many, but the specific discussion that we had was around whether or not it's going to replace people's jobs, right? And I think that the general answer that we've come to is maybe, but probably not if we deal with the skills gap and the employer demand and find some solutions to help solve for that. I also think that, again, this whole world, many people have been studying it for a long time, but the average user is in its infancy and certainly just beginning to understand what this all means. But using your cybersecurity example, one of my other colleagues, Gordon, recently wrote an article about how he used ChatGPT to create a cybersecurity job description for an entry-level job, and sure enough, it said 5 years of experience. Like it's just not, he iterated on it a couple of times, and it still didn't, actually. It's
like not computing.
It's not.
Exactly.
So I think we need, we're working on figuring out how do we prepare the workforce, and how do we as CompTIA help train as many people as we can to be in cybersecurity, because we know the demand is there.
I mean, just very basically, you have, if the idea is that, and I think the researchers are in agreement on this, that AI will basically take on the menial, drudge work tasks that, but the problem with that is that, if you think about most entry-level jobs, good entry-level jobs, that's most of what they're doing, right? They're doing that work. So entry-level jobs are going to become more like mid-level jobs now, where you're going to be saying, okay, well, you don't need to do that, but you're going to need to do more, problem solving and business development and stuff that we expect of mid-level jobs now. So that's where we're heading, and it's hard to imagine employers hiring, for that position en masse right out of college with no relevant experience.
So let's return to apprenticeships. So when I was on the National Institute for Cybersecurity Education Board, this was like the theme of every monthly meeting, right? And all of the big employers who were struggling with this were coming with ideas and programs, and many of them were apprenticeships. Yeah. And the problem was, and I think this is relevant to our university partners as well, how do we build apprenticeships into the college experience? But the problem was scale. So what do you have to think about that?
So just very briefly, I don't want to derail the conversation. If you look at where apprenticeships thrive globally or in the US, so Germany, Austria, Switzerland, UK, Australia, they are 10 to 15 times where we are in terms of apprentices as a percentage of the workforce. UK, Canada, Australia, they're 8 times where we are as a percentage of, and they're across, in those countries, they're across the economy. In the US, 70% of our apprenticeships are in the construction trades, which is great. Those are great jobs, but obviously we need to scale across the economy. Yeah. So the secret that other countries have figured out that we haven't figured out is that employers on their own won't do this, right? If you look at where apprenticeships scale, they've scaled because there are intermediaries that are incentivized, or in the case of Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, legally responsible, right? Chambers of commerce and unions, for actually building and running these apprenticeship programs for employers. The UK and Australia have solved it by essentially funding and incentivizing a whole ecosystem of intermediaries to emerge that run and that set up and run these programs for employers and are actively selling them to employers. So in the UK, you have the Association of Experiential Learning Providers, a trade association of 1,200 apprenticeship intermediaries that are in the business of setting up these programs, and they run around and try and knock on the doors of employers and say, would you like us to help you set up and run an apprenticeship program for you? That doesn't exist here. So in the US, I've helped found a organization called Apprenticeships for America, which is a trade association. We've scoured the country trying to find every apprenticeship intermediary there is, from Year Up to Apprenti to CareerWise, to the companies that we invest in, like Reviture and Skillstorm and Optimum Healthcare IT. We have 200. So given the size of our economy, we should have 6,000 apprenticeship intermediaries. So we need a lot more, and that's going to require different policy and a different level of funding for apprenticeship. That's what now nobody needs to buy my book because you know what it's about.
I think that I love that. Thank you for that. And this is not off topic. This is at the center of, I think, what's going to happen, as you guys have laid out, is these apprenticeships and structured work experiences are going to become more important, not less.
Well, let me just add that there's no reason why a university or a community college can't become an intermediary, an apprenticeship intermediary. So, and if you want to know what an apprenticeship intermediary is, go to the apprenticeshipsforamerica.org site, click on the top button that says, what is an apprenticeship intermediary? That'll tell you.
And Adam, I see you smiling over there.
I think this is an enormous equity issue too. I want to make sure we talk about that some. Look, and I'm gonna smash. I hope it's not a sin here. I'm gonna smash apprenticeships, internships, study abroad together for this type of a conversation. You talked about it before. Where are they going to get the experiences? Historically, I think certain groups of students had more access to that than others. But a lot of the virtual and online stuff we're doing now really starts to level the playing field. And so my dream for the University of North Texas is that every single one of our undergrads leaves with some kind of industry experience through one of these channels. We're working with Podium Education now in a virtual study abroad type situation. I couldn't study abroad. I was at the University of Illinois. I talked to my parents about it. They laughed at me. There's no way we can afford that. I didn't have that opportunity. Yes, it's not like going to Italy, but still you're working maybe with an Italian company. You're understanding the practices and the policies there. That's going to change your life. It's going to broaden your perspectives. Same thing with some of the industry opportunities. Maybe you don't live 30 minutes away from the Toyota headquarters like we do, but you're in a rural area, but you can still have a chance to do a work project with Toyota, for example. And so I think I'm very excited. I'm very optimistic that we can have more students having these type of opportunities.
Let me just add on there that Northeastern has spent decades building its global network, right? That, not every school can do that. But now you have these marketplaces of online experiential learning, like Ripen, RIIPEN, where faculty members can search through tens of thousands of relevant work experiences and incorporate them as capstone projects into their coursework. So there's really no excuse. Every university should have relevant experiential learning.
I love it. I'm so glad that you brought up the equity point, Adam, because what strikes me about this, and I've been thinking about this for some time, is as sort of that educational pathway unbundles, and we have industry certified or industry recognized certifications and apprenticeships and degrees and more certifications, and these pathways are becoming pathways to value, pathways to opportunity are becoming more complex, not less, right? And so, like,
but also more accessible and cheaper.
More accessible and cheaper, but nonetheless, the navigation issue for learners, like, how do we make sure that we are laser focused on equity in making certain that we are illuminating these pathways to every learner, not just learners who have activist parents or who have better access to school districts that are providing more information, or universities that are providing more information. Like, I do think there is, even though it's getting more accessible, it's getting more affordable, it's scaling. Like, it's still fairly complicated.
I hope that's one of the ways that AI can help out. Again, so higher education is not known for easy UX. Probably we're the worst at it. Lots of forms to fill out, intimidating. I can't even tell what I'm going to pay. There's fees. And so I think we've taken that more seriously as an industry over the past 5 to 10 years. I think if we can use some of the bots to answer some of the standard questions and then kind of level up our humans, and we understand kind of the white glove service, not just, a quickly answer and move on to the next, potential student, I think we can gain a lot of ground.
I want to make 2 points. One is that obviously a lot of this has to happen at high school, or if per ASA, American Student Assistance, at the middle school level. We need a lot more career discovery at that level.
Yeah.
Right now, what happens is every state requires that every high school student be run through a college and career readiness program, which is typically a check-the-box exercise on a software platform like Naviance. That is, 95% about college and 5% about other things. That needs to change. I've written that we need to reverse the C's. It should be career and college readiness. And we need a lot more career discovery in high school. The other point is that if the pathways are truly more accessible and cheaper and faster, it's lower stakes. Right? So you don't need to worry as much about making a mistake where you're going to be 6 figures in debt, and 3 years later you haven't completed a credential. So that's part of it.
Yes, indeed.
This is where I'm really excited about what we're going to launch with Coursera this summer, right? The three entry pathways into IT jobs, right? So A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, and it's obviously going to be accessible to many people, and low cost, not a huge time commitment, but provide a preview, right, of what it would be like to be in one of those careers where there's not a ton on the line. You're not having to put up a ton of money or a lot, but really kind of explore, right? And I think we just need to make it accessible to people.
You want to know it's learner first is $1,000 is a lot of money for a lot of people, but $49 to do something on Google, that's something I can give a try. I can stick my toe back in the water and say, get my confidence. Maybe I've been out of any kind of college or post-secondary education for 15, 20 years. The average age of students in our bachelor's completion is between 35 and 37 years old. It's intimidating. And it may not be worth it for $1,000 or $2,000, but I might give it a try for $49.
It's absolutely, it's full of grace, and it really does allow people to build back that confidence that in many cases they've lost. And it is, for that reason alone, it's so
I think
powerful.
you just came up with the tagline, alternative credentials, full of grace.
Full of grace. So we do have to, I cannot believe that we talked this long, because I thought it was going to be difficult to fill up the hour. I feel like now we could spend 5 hours, but we do have a few questions here from our audience. So do we believe that employers are truly rethinking whether their positions need a degree? Like, is this work of sort of unbundling degree as primary requirement for jobs, is this actually happening? And are they actually thinking about that in a skills-based way? That question comes from Julianne Edwards.
Yes. In the study that's coming out next week, there is, I don't remember the exact statistics, but it's more than 50%. But more than 50% of HR leaders and hiring managers have agreed that they are beginning to rethink, or have already decided to rethink, the necessity for a degree requirement for a variety of roles.
Yeah. So the hype is true.
Yes.
I think they've already rethought it.
Yeah.
And it's just a question of how to execute it from a sort of top-of-funnel technology standpoint, as we were saying at the top.
Yeah.
I think, too, for government workers, which government's one of our biggest employers, we're seeing state after state after state declare that for jobs working for the state government, they are completely removing the degree requirement for 80% or more of their jobs. I think Colorado,
7 states now.
Colorado, Utah, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Alaska, and
North Carolina.
Have all declared, even within the last year, that they're taking the degree requirements off their jobs.
It's huge.
So, Lisa, this I think would be great for you to answer. What are you seeing in terms of how micro-credentials are tracking into a degree, or people are taking them parallel to the degree? Are you seeing sort of a complementarity there, and is that sort of is there a trend there that's taking root? And
For sure there is. We first created the Google Career Certificates to solve this problem about how do you provide career development training to people without a degree. But what we quickly saw in the data is that about 40% of our learners were taking the Google Career Certificate and had a degree.
Right.
And at first we were really confused, if I'm honest. Like, why would anyone do that? That seems irrational. And it is actually completely rational. So if you look at Lightcast data, Ryan was talking about Lightcast a minute ago, which is one of the best sources of data on employment and skills. It actually shows that if you complement your bachelor's degree with a high quality industry recognized credential, you will become dramatically more employable at dramatically higher wages. And so these people were behaving rationally. And so we started trying to figure out how could we partner more with universities? How do we really work together to make it an and, not an or? Mm-hmm. And now we have 6 different ways that we partner with universities. I mentioned earlier our program where people build on top of our credentials. Columbia University has done that. Johns Hopkins University has done that. Michigan, Illinois, ASU. So that's one way. A lot of schools will offer it, will give credit for prior learning. That's very common in community colleges, but also now in a lot of 4-year institutions, you can get up to 15 credits for doing one of the Google Career Certificates, which is quite a few credits to get you on your way or toward a bachelor completion, as Adam was talking about a minute ago. We announced a giant partnership with the University of Texas and Texas State Systems, which is the 3rd largest systems in our country, where they're offering it to all of their students in a variety of ways, some for credit, some not for credit, more extracurricular. They're building some directly into their classes. And so there's just been this explosion of creativity of different ways that not only community colleges but 4-year universities are building the Google Career Certificates, either making them accessible to students or alumni, or actually building it right into their core programs and giving credit for it. And I think it's really exciting. Again, it was a surprise to us, and now we're really leaning into it because it's just so fruitful for everyone and truly working. And then the other thing I'll say, which a minute ago, Ryan, you were talking about high schools.
Yeah.
And we actually are seeing the Google Career Certificate program take off in high schools.
Yeah.
It's really fun to see people embracing, whether you're going to go on to college or not, the value of having these skills. And so we're also partnering all over the country with a variety of high school or high school systems.
Yeah.
That's great.
I do want to underscore something about this. I think another issue with skills-based certifications is they do sort of defy our traditional linear sense of first high school, then undergrad, then grad school. So they're hard to fit in to the sort of incumbent pathway, because really you could have, I've encouraged my own daughters to take gateway certs on Google. My husband, we're seeing them path into undergraduate degrees, path into graduate degrees. They're skills, and they aren't necessarily aligned with graduate credit versus undergraduate credit, and that's interesting, right? That's new.
Well, it shouldn't panic universities either to hear, the 7, 8 states now remove the degree requirement, because that's fine, and that gets you. Why not have our students get these jobs? It's now possible to go ahead and get that job before you have a degree, or even before you start college, and then go on as you want to rise up beyond the entry level to skill with a more major credential.
Yeah. So last question. I think a lot of the conversation today, because this is where we all live, has sort of focused on North America. But what are we seeing outside, across places like countries like India or China, where competition for jobs is much higher? Are we seeing the same kind of trends there? I mean, it seems like it from the research that we've done, but what are you seeing in your research, your work?
I mean, my answer is yes. I think we're actually ahead frankly, because our system of higher education is, well, one, I think we're ahead on digital transformation, and second, I think our system of higher education is the most expensive. So we're seeing more pressure for these faster and cheaper credentials, but I think there's no question that this is not a North American only phenomenon.
Are you seeing that too, Lisa?
We are. I think our credentials started taking off in countries all over the world before we were even really thinking about it. And now they're incredibly popular. The Google Career Certificates are really popular in India. They're really popular in Nigeria. They're really popular throughout Latin America, and in places, of course, like the UK and Egypt. And so every time I look at the leaderboard, the dashboard we have, I'm in awe of the places where we're not doing any promotional efforts, but people are just discovering it, and it's just taking off on its own.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation, truly.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see what's next. Thanks so much.
Thank you.